everyone. Welcome to another episode of Group Therapy. Today we are with the infamous Brett Barlow, CEO and founder of Everee, former chief brand officer at Pluralsight, and one of my personal favorites in the category of marketing leaders that I look up to. So I feel really honored that I'm sharing the mic with you today. Thanks so much for being
here. That is way too kind. I appreciate it. I mean, I'll take it for sure, but
you deserve all of it. So this was fun for me because I, in my previous role, had a front row seat to the growth of Pluralsight with you as their chief brand officer. And so I have witnessed firsthand how you are able to assemble a dynamic team of marketing and creative and brand leaders in this space. So my first big question to you is actually, how do you assemble that team in your experience? I know you have a history of doing this well, but what do you look for? What are your thoughts? And as far as, assembling that team?
Yeah. Well, brand initiatives or building brand in general should be aligned with the company initiatives. So first starting out with is, what are the roots of your brand? What are your mission, vision, values of a company, and how do you want to portray that? And then kind of the personnel or the tactics come out of that. But you have to have a kind of a baseline or a home base to build everything from. So if you don't have those mission, vision, values, then what you're doing is just putting ads out or content for lead generation or something like that. And it doesn't really have any,
impact
to it, meaning to it, purpose for it, authenticity to it. So starting there. And one thing I would say is product marketing is a really great partner to brand. So if you don't have a strong partner marketing team, for starting, I would say, invest there first. And then brand can take that because they're doing the research on your ICPs and they're figuring out kind of pricing and things like that. So without that as a base, mission, vision, values, research, kind of where is your product market fit, and then brand coming along and saying, okay, well, how can we make this authentic to who we are and really kind of get the word out. So, and then I think a common, interpretation of brand is a great logo. You guys just went through a rebrand and a rename, which is contrary to popular maybe opinion, not the easiest thing in the world to do. It is incredibly hard to do. Those things all seem to me are outputs of and just kind of representations, but you have to have something that they stand for and what they mean. So it really depends. If you have those things, then aligning yourself with the business priorities as a whole. Are you trying to penetrate a specific market? Are you trying to be maybe classified in a certain magic quadrant of Forrester or Gartner? Are you really trying to resonate with, if you're a B2C brand, with consumers and compete in maybe a noisy space? So some of those objectives would dictate then who you're looking for as teammates. And then when I do that, I look for people that are way better at things than I am. And that's pretty much everything, to be honest, because I'm not a designer. If you put me in front of Illustrator, I would embarrass myself. I really would. So I need to have people around me that are better at things than I am. I've also found that in startups specifically, what people tend to do is they start with kind of the least experienced or the least expensive because they're trying to save on money. And I understand that perspective. I take an opposite approach of that. And if it's worth spending money on, get the right person for the right job.
Yeah.
Right. And that tends to be a little bit more senior people. I'm not saying you need to kind of surround yourself with vice presidents all over the place, but you need people that can act independently, that have a perspective, that are talented in their work and believe in what you're doing. What you're not hearing me say is, oh, I would hire, a digital designer or a UX designer first, or, I don't think that there's a specific cadence or order for roles specifically. It's what are the needs of the business and the stage of the business, and where are there maybe gaps between me and what needs to be done. And then I fill those gaps with those people.
Yeah, I think that's great. And to your point too, there's also something to be said about people who can come in and make a really big impact right away
Yeah.
and build upon prior learnings and experience. And that ultimately could put you in a better spot moving forward to, obviously drive growth and revenue in that way. So I think that's a smart approach. I guess, I think about, taking risks as a brand, right? Trying to stand out.
Mm-hmm.
And, um, you know, I'd be curious to hear from your perspective, how do you decide what activities are worth the risk? I think back to some pretty weird projects that you were very supportive and behind at Pluralsight
Mm-hmm.
that I was like, what is going on? We have this person who's moved into a production office, is building this insane, kinetic reactive
Oh, you
brand.
remember that?
I remember
Yeah.
it so well. And so that's, for our audience, I'm more just speaking about what are those off the wall projects that are worth taking the risk and placing bets on, and how do you assess that to determine, yeah, that's valuable and we're going to go in on that activity.
Okay, I'm gonna share with you. Get a pen and paper. I'm gonna share with you the formula for that right now.
Okay, I can't
Not
wait.
scientific. Um, that was John Jensen, a very creative person, and
That's
we had
right.
that at one of our Pluralsight live events. Um, a mentor to me when I first started out my career was a man by the name of Dave Thomas, and he and his sons founded Thomas Arts. But at the time when I joined them, they were at Publicis. And there was a phrase that he shared with me early on that brands need to be noticed, believed, and remembered. So when you're talking about risk and you're in a crowded or competitive space, you have to do things that make people, you don't have to, but there are opportunities for you to do things where the person viewing it or experiencing it can go, it's kind of like, trip the hell, like, what? What was that? It has to be relevant to what you're doing. It shouldn't just
Yeah.
be like a glass unicorn statue or something like that. I mean, that's just a random thought, but it's something that gets you noticed. But then at the same time, that thing needs to be associated with content, people, subject matter experts, authenticity to make it be actually believed. Like you've got their attention. And then you're helping them believe that what you have to say has some level of validity. So that particular thing was a build out on the outside of our main stage, right? So they're getting content from people, from thought leaders that are kind of helping them do their business. So it's getting noticed and then believed with the credibility that's supported by the people that are on stage. Some of them are our employees or our authors. Some of them were just industry experts. And then remembered, like how do you take something, some of that artifact with it? So there's various ways that you can have someone take something with you. I think the most important way is, and I'm not the person who coined this phrase, I believe it was actually Jeff Bezos, who says you can determine a brand by what people say about you when you're not in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's the remembered part of it. So when they're at an event like what we're talking about right now, it's not really 100% what they heard on stage or what they saw. It's not the words that were said. It's every bit as much how did they feel?
Yeah.
How did they feel either talking one-on-one with a sales rep in a room somewhere upstairs and in an executive suite having a conversation? How did they feel when they were greeted at the door? How did they feel when they looked at this kinetic music machine that was created and the people that were around that and the enthusiasm that they felt? So noticed, believed, and remembered. And I think that can kind of, I don't think noticed should necessarily stand on its own, and that feels gimmicky.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can couple it with believed and remembered, then you've got an opportunity for a really meaningful, thoughtful event that people will take, not just event, but interaction that people will take with them once you've left.
Yeah, I think so. It reminded me of, an approach that I take with creative in general is they don't necessarily remember what they saw or what they heard, to what you just said, but they do remember what they felt.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be translated across every channel.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we're crafting messaging, that's going to be relatable. It's why we're really focusing on how we're presenting that message visually. And it's also why maybe they have to see it 7 or 8 times
Mm-hmm.
before they take action on it. And so I think that's a really great rule of thumb. Um, and so this leads me into my next question, because now you're in a CEO role. You are one of the founders of Everee.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have a really strong brand and marketing background. So a lot of times, I think, as creatives and brand leaders, we're having to make a case for resources to CEOs who maybe are missing that component and its importance. So
Yeah.
I would love to hear your advice on how do we present in a way to get that investment and that buy-in. What sort of criteria are you measuring for those brand activities? Like, what can we do to make a case to CEOs to invest in brand?
Yeah. Well, it is a change for me to be in this role because I have a view into the business as a whole and more kind of purview into things that are going on. And so I have a lot of different things that I'm trying to balance. But ultimately, I have investors that I'm trying to make sure that they're taken care of. We have shareholders, even our employees. Like I would like our business to be a success, and you can't ignore revenue growth and profitability and margins and net retention rates, and like those things are real.
Mm-hmm.
As a creative director, not to oversimplify your career, but I think that I would consider myself, and you probably do, as a storyteller.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily B2C or B2B. It's there's humans have needs, and a creative person is charged with somehow presenting the features, benefits, values of whatever product in a way that resonates with them and becomes personal to them. I would suggest that that is just as important for you to do internally
Mm-hmm.
within your business as it is externally to the audience. So there's a coaching and I used to call them road trips that I would do. And I would go meet and I would start not just with the executive team. I would ask to join team meetings and explain what we're doing. So the entry level employee to the mid level manager to, kind of VP level and above understood what we were about and the value of it and got them excited, about it. But then ultimately you have to have people that sign the checks. So
Yeah.
in some way you have to, in your storytelling, you're communicating to others that have a lot of things on their plate, how this is valuable to them. And, brand can be associated with revenue. There's a demand to brand kind of mentality out there that just because it's direct response or something like that doesn't mean that it has to be your traditional, business to boring, type approach. You can show how brand contributes to the financial metrics, but it shouldn't wholly be measured by those things. Some things that we've done to measure them are pre and post quantitative surveys for just share of voice that we've done. There's also a lot of information, and we've done a lot of testing on how your direct response goes down when you reduce your brand dollars in certain ways. But it's also maybe where you're spending the dollars and really tuning into where for the CEO or the chief revenue officer is really important to them. So sharing how brand can impact specific verticals that they're going after, or KPIs that the board is kind of maybe honing in on at that particular time, and how you can be a support or a lead in that. Old school people think that brand and marketing is like Mad Men, and you're just putting up a billboard that's like, I don't know, just a billboard that's
Yeah.
supposed to get kind of kitschy phrase and, gets people attention. And I think a lot of people see that as, don't maybe appreciate the value of it. I think if that works in a market that you're in, then, totally go after that. But brand in some way should be able to contribute to some. I think brand people push back on being accountable to things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's brand. You can't really measure it. You just kind of have to feel it. It's just there. And look, to some of that, that's true. You can't quantify all of it, but you have to think like a business person. And if you go into a CFO and say, well, yeah, I can't ever really quantify this to you, he's going to say, okay, well, then come back to me when you can, know? So you find creative ways to show the value of brand. And that could be an increase in customer service, like your NPS, an increase in customer service call and responses to that. Time to close for business deals. Like there's a lot of things, because I feel like I'm talking a lot, but
no, that's the point.
There's an old school, like for demand marketing, go generate leads.
Yeah.
And then they come into a funnel and they're scored, and then they're distributed to wherever they are. And you can produce hundreds of thousands or millions of leads. I believe we've moved beyond that now, and we're looking for people with intent. And that comes with great content and being authentic, and maybe 7 or 8 times when they've seen it, they feel like they know you a little better. And brand, I believe, helps bring those types of buyers into the funnel, so to speak. Buyers with intent, because they resonate. What the message that you're giving out there resonates with them. And so when an option comes up, not only have they heard of you, but they want to be associated with you because you connected with them. So there are ways to get those dollars, but there's a storytelling and a teaching element to internal people that you just have to adopt it. I think people they should just get it. Why don't they understand? Creatives are so misunderstood. People don't appreciate us. And I think I would put that back on brand people and say, well, you have an accountability to that too, to help the people around you understand the passion that you feel and the benefits that you bring to the audience, or to the company. And I found most people quite receptive to that, because you're bringing them into the fold instead of teaching like, well, you just don't understand.
Yeah. I think it's so true, because there is, it's just about impact. It's like the activities that I'm executing on in a creative role, making sure that actually is going to drive impact of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, the goal is that leads to growth and revenue.
Mm-hmm.
But, I was just at Adobe Summit last week, and one of the primary topics, no surprise, was doing more with less resources.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's being asked to do that. We're watching, several companies go through layoffs and pulling back on budgets because of, the macroeconomic situation we're in. And one of the big things was it's very quick for companies to decide to pull back on brand activities and not invest there during economic environments like this, and instead focus on product marketing, or some of these other avenues that are a little bit more predictable. And so I guess my question would be, do you agree or disagree with that advice? And maybe what approach are you taking?
Is it possible for me to agree and disagree?
For sure. Absolutely.
Look, there's a kind of fiduciary responsibility to do right by the business. And if cutting back on resources saves people's jobs, so resources meaning spend, then yeah, there's a point for that. I would much rather cut back on a specific program or initiative and save to art directors, So in that sense, I agree with that. The part where I don't agree with it is if you could compare it to the market, the stock market. When we're going through a tumultuous time right now in the stock market. I pointed to it like it's just sitting right here.
It's sitting out right there on the wall.
This stock market is yes. We're going through a tumultuous time, and people are selling off, and there's uncertainty in those things. One might argue that this is the time to buy into the market because things are going down. And if you have that available capital to you, go buy some stocks. So to correlate that to brand, when people are cutting back on their brand initiatives, it can be an opportunity for people that are willing to do that to actually invest more in brand because there's more space for them to be able to be heard and to be seen and to kind of cut through the competition. So do I agree in cutting back? In sometimes, sure. I can see the reasons for that. But I think that also you should look at that as potentially a real opportunity for you to make some noise where maybe you couldn't afford to compete with maybe some of the larger players in the market if you're not one of them and they've cut back because they're having rifts and other things. That might give you a chance to kind of like climb up some ladders with awareness within your own group.
Yeah, I think too, also an opportunity for reframing on messaging. Everybody's in a very similar position. And so it's like, okay, how can we push our product or our solution to where they're going to want to invest in it because it solves for the current conditions that we're in, can also maybe help with this lack of resources issue. I noticed when everything was happening with Silicon Valley Bank, people from Everee were incredible at stepping up and saying, hey, we would love to help you, but also we pay people every day. And this is how we do it. And it was an opportunity for you to break through a lot of the noise that was happening at that time. So yeah, I think, agree and disagree, and also deciding what activities you want to invest in with the little budgets you have. So I have like a final question, which is, what are the most common mistakes you would say B2B businesses make with branding? Like, what are the things that you see and you're just like, ugh, that's not the way to do it, or they should do it this way instead?
We need an hour conversation
We
for
do.
that one. I think one of the common mistakes is you look around you and you try to be like everybody else in your market because you feel like that's kind of the standard.
Yeah.
And going back to my noticed, believed, and remembered statement before of if you're not willing to take a risk and just put things out that relate to people, you notice in certain verticals, companies have like the same color palettes, like they kind of say the same things. We're in payroll, so it's not hard for us to do things that are a little bit edgy, because they're just an old kind of status quo kind of industry. I think, I'm not sure I have quite the answer for that one.
Yeah.
I
think that's a good.
There's a lot of risk that you can take. But I think people want a silver bullet for marketing. They want to know if I'm going to put $1 into branding or to demand generation or sales enablement or field marketing, then I'm going to get $3 to $6 to $9 out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not that up and to the right. The path to success is circuitous, and that it goes left, right, up, down, over. And that's the same with brands. I think you have to be agile and adjust to the situation that you're in and get your team to buy into like, hey, I know you might have put a lot of work into something and that looks or feels amazing, but we need to pivot really quickly in support of the business. And by showing you're a good partner to other people, like I see an isolationism with creative teams a lot of times. And when you are able to saddle up next to a CRO or, head of product or something and saying, how can I help you? Which problems are you facing? I think you get other people telling your story for you. Like, I can't live without Katie. Give her what she needs. She understands my business and she's here to help me. I think that goes a long way. Creatives, similar to engineers, I think in general, get a bad rap of, well, you just wouldn't understand. And I think that happens a lot. The brand leaders that stand out for me are excellent, excellent partners to the other people in the business. And they focus on how they can help other people as much as how much they can get their pet project approved and funded.
Yeah. And I think to follow up on that point, what I've learned is it really is about experimentation, and in realizing that the things that we're testing to work may not work in a few months, but worked and had an impact at that time. And to just constantly allow that to be iterative and come up with new ideas, fuel creative in different ways. Because I view it the same way, creative under the guise of not just things that look pretty, but also messaging that resonates, telling our brand story in a powerful way. And marketing really is that. So I think that it's good advice for us to trust our instincts to try to stand out, in the in the competitive space, of course. But well, I am super grateful for your time, and I like you wish that we had a full hour, so maybe we'll have you back. But thank you so much, and we'll see everyone again on another episode of Group Therapy.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was absolutely a pleasure. It's good to speak with you, Katie. Thank you.
Great, thank you.